He was wrong. 3 years later, under a blazing desert sun, that promise would come roaring back. The desert sun blazed mercilessly, turning the endless stretch of highway into a shimmering ribbon of heat. Jim Walker's rig had sputtered to a stop hours ago, its engine silent and lifeless beneath a scorching sky. Sweat ran down his brow as he climbed out, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. The CB radio, old and battered like him, sat dusty on the dashboard. His fingers trembled as he grabbed the microphone and whispered into it. "Anyone out there? This is Walker. Need help. Over." Static hissed back, slicing through the desert silence. Jim's hope flickered and faltered. He tried again, voice but steady. "Breaker, breaker." Walker calling. "Stranded near mile marker 72. Engine dead. Requesting assistance." The desert swallowed his words. Miles away, a convoy rolled steadily along the highway, a cluster of military vehicles cutting through the dust like a wave. Staff Sergeant Daniel Harris sat in the lead Humvee, his eyes scanning the horizon beneath his dusty desert cap. Suddenly, the crackle of static burst through the radio. He leaned in, caught a faint, familiar voice. "Walker, is that you?" Daniel's heart raced. The voice was unmistakable. The trucker who had once shared his breakfast 3 years ago in a small roadside diner. A memory long buried in desert heat now came rushing back. He ordered the convoy to slow. "Breaker, this is Harris. We hear you loud and clear. Hold tight. We're coming." His voice was calm but filled with urgency. The men around him exchanged glances. They knew that rescue was about to begin. As the convoy veered off the highway onto a dusty side road, Daniel's mind flashed to that rainy diner, the quiet handshake, the promise made without words. Now it was his turn. Jim watched from the roadside, eyes scanning the rising dust on the horizon. The engines roared closer, and relief washed over him. The convoy pulled up beside him, soldiers jumping down with water and shade. Daniel offered his hand, steady and sure. "You saved me once," Daniel said quietly, handing Jim a bottle of water. "Now it's my turn." The Humvee doors slammed shut as Staff Sergeant Daniel Harris stepped down onto the hot desert ground. His boots kicked up a small cloud of dust as he approached Jim Walker's stranded rig. The sun beat down relentlessly, but Daniel's focus was sharp, eyes scanning the rig's engine in the trucker's weary face. "Water first," Daniel said, handing Jim a cold bottle from his pack. Jim accepted it gratefully, the cool relief settling in his parched throat. Daniel glanced around, noting the empty highway stretching into the shimmering heat waves. "What happened out here?" he asked. "Engine died hours ago," Jim replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "No way to call for help until now." He looked at Daniel, gratitude mingling with exhaustion. "You're the first sign of hope." Daniel nodded, his mind racing. A broke trucker spent his last few dollars buying breakfast for a young soldier he barely knew. Years later, stranded in a scorching desert with a dead rig and no help in sight, a desperate call over a dusty CB radio changes everything. What arrives next is not just a rescue. It is a powerful repayment of kindness that neither of them expected. Hit like and comment where you're watching from. Your support brings more amazing stories. Now let's begin. The diner was almost empty that cold February morning. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the smudged windows, while inside, the smell of burnt coffee lingered like an old friend. Jim Walker sat alone at the far end of the counter, nursing a mug that had long since gone cold. His face was weathered, marked by years on the road, and his hands rested on the chipped countertop, fingers tracing the worn wood. His wallet was thin, just a few crumpled bills left, barely enough to buy his own breakfast, and maybe a gallon of fuel to keep his rig moving. The door creaked open, and a young man stepped. Inside, he wore faded army fatigues, his heavy rucksack hanging awkwardly over one shoulder. The soldier's eyes carried a tired weight, the kind that comes from sleepless nights and miles traveled on dusty roads. His shoulders sagged under his gear, and the warmth of the diner must have been a brief relief from the cold rain outside. He glanced at the menu board, then quietly pushed it aside. "Just water," he told the waitress in a voice barely above a whisper, rough from exhaustion. The waitress gave him a look, a mixture of sympathy and concern, before filling a glass. Jim noticed it all, the subtle signs of hunger hidden behind the soldier's pride. Without thinking, he waved the waitress over. "Put his meal on my tab." he said firmly. The soldier started to protest, shaking his head with a faint smile, but Jim cut him off with a grin. "Eat up, son! The road's long, and the army sure doesn't feed you enough." For a few minutes, they ate in silence, two strangers sharing warmth in a worn-out diner far from home. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, as if marking time itself. When the plates were cleared, the soldier reached into his pocket for his wallet. Jim shook his head. "Save it for the road." The young man's eyes met his, and in that moment, a quiet promise was made. They stood and shook hands, the soldier's grip firm despite his fatigue. "I won't forget this," the soldier said softly. Jim smiled faintly, thinking he would never see the kid again. In his hand, he held up two shining keys that caught the sunlight, glinting like promises fulfilled. "This one's for you, Jim," Daniel called out. "And this one," he held up the second key, "is for the road ahead." Jim's throat tightened. He stood slowly, stepping onto the gravel as the flatbed came to a stop. He ran a hand over the gleaming truck, every detail immaculate. A brand new beginning carved from years of kindness and grit. Daniel clapped him on the shoulder. "You gave me hope when I needed it most. Now it's your turn. Keep on rolling, Jim." Tears welled in Jim's eyes, but he smiled wide, the weight of years lifting from his shoulders. The rig wasn't just a truck. It was a second chance, a symbol of a debt repaid, not with money, but with gratitude and respect. As the convoy departed, Jim climbed into the cab, fingers tightening around the keys. The engine roared to life, strong and steady. The desert road stretched before him, no longer lonely or daunting. He thought back to that rainy diner, to the stranger with tired eyes who needed a meal in a hand. Now miles away from that day, the kindness he gave had circled back, stronger, louder, and full of hope. Jim smiled to himself. Some debts don't need to be repaid. They just need to be remembered.